I'm Stacey J.
And I'm Chuck Duran.
Welcome to VO Buzz Weekly, the web entertainment show dedicated to the voiceover business.
That's right. And on today's guest, we have Publishers Weekly Narrator of the Year, twice running, Scott Brick. And here's what I have to say. If anybody out there has the slightest bit of interest in audiobook narrating, you do not want to miss today's episode because...
He's the guy.
He is the guy.
Yeah.
He is the guy. And we're very excited to have him on the show today.
Yeah.
What do you got for us?
Well, we've been getting great viewer emails and comments, and the ones you can read on Facebook and the website are great too, but the ones that come through VOBuzzWeekly at yahoo.com, we wanted to share just a couple of those because they've been really, really lovely, and we wanted to give you guys a shout out. So.
Shout outs. Wait, we're giving shout outs now?
Yes!
This is awesome.
Who knew? Okay, so this one comes from Melissa. She says 1,000 times thank you. This is a field that I've been interested in for years. I half-heartedly pursued it way back when, and now the passion to follow the dream is rekindled. That's
wow.
really cool.
VO Buzz Weekly is rekindling dreams. I love that.
Congratulations, Melissa.
Thank you,
know
Melissa.
what? It's always hard to start something, but keep going because you can do it.
Yeah, Melissa rocks.
And let us know how it's going.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Updates.
Okay, this is from Tom. Tom says, I just want to tell you that I think you're doing a fantastic job with VO Buzz Weekly. It just couldn't be better or more interesting. VO Buzz Weekly is something that I look forward to every week. Thanks so much for taking the time and effort to produce such an entertaining and informative program. That's cool,
very,
Tom.
Very, very cool.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And you know what? With that, I'm going to take a little second here and just say this, that Stacey is extremely busy. I'm extremely busy. I'm sure you guys are extremely busy.
Yes.
So I don't know if you realize how much time it actually takes for us to sit here and do these episodes for you guys and bring in guests and arrange everything. We have lights all around us and a crew over there and all kinds of crazy stuff. And it actually costs us money to bring the show to you, and we're not charging anybody a dime. So it makes us feel good when people send us notes letting us know how much they appreciate it, or if they're getting something out of the show, because it makes it worth it. So thank you for that.
That's the whole point. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
What else is going on?
Well, I got something for you right now.
Are you taking calls now?
No, but check this out.
Okay.
Siri, what's your favorite color?
My favorite color is, well, I don't know how to say it in your language. It's sort of greenish, but with more dimensions.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So, I don't know if any of you guys have heard of Siri. If you have the new iPhone 4S, then you know who Siri is. If you don't, you've probably heard of her. And Apple is making it a big, big secret, and they will not reveal who the voice of Siri is, and we don't know who she is in the U.S., we don't know who she is in Canada, and we didn't know who she was or he was in the U.K. until just recently. So imagine this, you're a voice actor, you get home from a nice full day of voice acting,
sessions,
right?
Yeah.
You sit down in front of the TV, you're watching your favorite show, and you see a commercial for the new iPhone, and you hear your voice as the voice of Siri. Okay? How exciting would that be? So this guy freaks out and tells everybody, hey, I'm the voice of Siri. No more secrets there, right?
Yeah.
So apparently what happened was...
But he didn't know he was the voice of Siri.
John Briggs is the voice of Siri. He's a voice actor in the UK. He had done a series of thousands of sentences and words and all kinds of stuff for a company called Scansoft in the UK, who later sold all this to Apple, but John never had a contract with Apple, so... he can reveal it. Apple tried to tell him, hey, stop telling people it's you. He's like, no, I'm excited about it. So they said, all right, whatever. So anyways, I thought that was a cute little story there for those of you that didn't know, and there we go.
Way to go, John. Well, I think it's time to bring on the brick.
Bring on the brick.
Scott Brick.
Let's do it.
So today our brand new guest chair holds the man who the Wall Street Journal and AudioFile magazine called the Golden Voice and one of the fastest rising stars in the audiobook galaxy. He has narrated over 600 titles to date, and he is also an accomplished stage actor, novelist, screenwriter, and teacher. We are so thrilled to welcome the Publishers Weekly Narrator of the Year twice, the very well read Scott Brick.
Yeah. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Great to have you on the show.
I've been looking forward to this.
Good.
I love the show.
I'm glad, man. I'll tell you what. First of all, I want to thank you, and I like thanking people because you know, I for one know how busy people are and all the stuff that happens throughout the day, and we know that 600 audiobooks is like, hello, you didn't do that last week. Anyways, we know you're busy. Thank you so much for taking the time, coming out, sharing with us, sharing with them.
Oh, absolutely.
And we appreciate your time. Cool?
I love it.
Any opening comments?
Touch my knee. I feel even better. I feel special.
Well, listen, Scott.
Do you two need to be alone? I could just.
This is not that kind of a program, ladies and gentlemen.
It is a G-rated program. Let us
It
remember.
is. We don't want to change our rating now. So anyways, I'm going to start right off by asking you a question, and that's, how did you find your way into this crazy business of audiobooks?
You know, it's funny because I get asked all the time, how do you get in? And I don't know if my career path is really one that you can imitate unless you know somebody in the industry. I asked my agent for 10 years after I got out of college, how do I get audiobook gigs? Because I'm a big fan of old-time radio. And I think audiobooks is the closest thing that we have to that. It's storytelling at its purest. And so for 10 years, she didn't know how to do it because it's not the entertainment industry. They don't advertise in the breakdowns, typically.
So your agent didn't know.
My former agent.
Your former agent didn't know.
Exactly.
His new agent
exactly.
does. Okay.
She didn't
Just
know.
clarifying.
So for 10 years, I never got any of the gigs, but it turns out that a buddy of mine I'd gone to college with at UCLA, he worked for Dove Audio at the time. He got me an audition. I went in, I got 2 short stories. I got booked to do 2 short stories, which I treated it as though it was another audition, because I'm thinking, okay, you know, it can't be this easy. They don't know, you know, 2 short stories. Come on, what, they're going to give me War and Peace next? And, you know, you do 20 minutes and then you're going to do, you know, 60 hours.
Right.
So I treated it like another audition, which I think everybody should do when you book your first gig. And then as I'm doing my first job, there was a guy working there that day named Dan Musselman. And he now works for Books on Tape, which is owned by Random House. He was leaving Dove Audio. It was literally his last day, on my first day, his last day. We like pass each other in the hallway. He heard me in the studio. On the break between the 2 stories, he hands me his card and says, I'm leaving to go build a studio for Books on Tape. I'm going to need readers. Why don't you give me a call in about a month and maybe do some jobs for me? And you know, when I look back on it, at the time it didn't seem like a lot, but 6-8 months later, Dove had gone bankrupt, sadly. I did maybe 6 or 8 jobs for them. Books on Tape, I've done, of the 600 jobs, I've done maybe 350, maybe as many as 400 have
only
been done.
that, only?
Yeah, right, exactly,
Gosh. Sorry, it's not working out for you.
Right, yeah, exactly. But I literally, I wonder where I would be if I didn't run into Dan Musselman. And actually,
I think you were exactly where you were supposed to be. That's what I think.
I think I was, and it's funny because I pretty much Dan made me his go-to guy after he opened his studio, which was wonderful. That's one of the reasons I recorded so many books. And so of course I memorized the phone number. I'm not looking at that card all the time, and I had misplaced that card. But literally 2 months ago, I'm cleaning out stuff in my garage. I'm going through boxes that I came so close to throwing away over the last 10 years so many times. I'd look at it and go, I'm never going to go through there, let me just toss it. And literally as I'm going an inch from the bottom of the box, there's a Black Widow spider, and then there's that card from Dan Musselman.
Oh my gosh.
And I looked at it and I just stared, and I had 3 or 4 friends over, and my girlfriend asked me, she was like, what is it? What is that? And I just said, that's my career.
Wow.
Is that one little card?
Yeah.
So
So that card is in a special
I framed
place
it.
now.
Yeah, I framed it. It's in our living room.
Wow.
And,
So moral of the story is collect as many cards as you can.
Or
You never know which is going to be the winner.
play baseball with friends from UCLA. You know.
Or that.
Well, on that note, you studied acting and writing at UCLA. Now, when you're narrating, you have such a seamless transition from going from narrative to dialogue in the books. Do you think that having an acting background is really important for a narrator? I mean, obviously, you have a long acting career, but is that something that really helps you get there?
I think so. I think you don't have to be a really accomplished actor. You don't have to have had a lot of acting experience. But at the very minimum, I'd say if somebody is, let's say they're working in voiceover now, or maybe they're in radio and they're wanting to transition into audiobooks, I think you should at least take an acting class so you're familiar with direction. You know how to take direction, work with the director. Because when I was doing theater, I never thought, wow, this is going to help if I ever develop an audiobook career. But now that I have an audiobook career, I realize I don't think I would be successful if I hadn't done all that theater. So there are some narrators who've never acted. Well, I know one guy, Mark Cashman, he had never been on stage. And he's been narrating audiobooks for years and years. And of course, he's done voiceover. God, he's legendary in the industry. But even he was the one guy I could point to and say, okay, well, he's the only one I know who's never been on stage. But literally this last Christmas, he calls me and says, I'm on stage, you gotta come see me. He had done a show
so you can do it in the beginning or you can do it at the end, but you gotta get it done.
Get the acting experience. It definitely helps.
That's great, man. In your opinion, what makes a great narrator different from just a narrator? Like, what are some ingredients that you feel make them great?
I think a lot of it is instinctive. When you're doing your first job, there's a tendency to be scared, be nervous, like we all are on our first jobs, and so you only concentrate on the words.
Right.
But instead, when you get confidence and when you've done it a lot, you start paying more attention to the context. Right. Because if you're just concentrating on the words and you just want to be accurate to the last period, the last comma, you can be technically accurate and say the line, "Who do you think you are, anyway?" And yet it doesn't.
That was awesome, by the way.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Very good.
Thank you. But it's. I was listening to a book recently.
Can you please say that again?
Right, yeah, I can.
That would be great.
But it's all about context. You say you say lines. Somebody asks you a question. It's not always going to go up at the end of the question. It's a hypothetical sometimes, but it's written with a question mark.
Right.
I think a great narrator is going to be able to trust him or herself and say, okay, I think I maybe need to dishonor the punctuation because I know the author's intent. I know what's going on in the context, and it's instinctive. A lot of that comes through experience, but I always tell people that the best direction I could give a first-time narrator is going to be slow down, because that's what they always tell you in the audiobook studio. But the other would be relax. Just relax and treat every line as though it was happening to you, whatever character you're playing. The main character in the book is always me. Just how would I act if this tragedy or great joy was happening in my life? That's how I would say that line. And then again, the very next line on the opposite question, the opposite person in the scene. It's just relax and put yourself into it.
Yeah.
Very good.
So I was reading a lot of reviews about your work, and you've been.
Stacey reads
doing that.
a lot of reviews.
I'm a reader.
Okay, well there we go.
I know my words, Scott.
Sure does.
Critics have described you, I'm just paraphrasing, you've been described as mesmerizing. You've been described as not a narrator that just reads, but one that takes the text and elevates it to another level.
I should be writing this down.
Right?
I mean, I should, yeah.
Does he know that people say
Do
this
you
stuff
know?
about him?
But how would you describe your style?
Wow. The only style I ever really think about in terms of audiobooks is what I tell my students. I say, stylistically, you either do or you don't. And they're like, what are we talking about? But to me, it's voices. In audiobooks, there tends to be two schools, the people who do character voices and those who don't. Jim Dale does the Harry Potter books. He's brilliant at character voices.
Yep.
He does character voices that you would imagine are going to be in a Saturday morning cartoon, animated film.
Right.
But he's working in a different genre than I typically work in. So more of my work is, even if it's science fiction, it's still more realism. And so I don't do huge character voices. So when I think about myself stylistically, if I had to describe myself, I'd say I'm one of those who don't. I mean, I'll do accents all the time.
Yeah, but you do so much more than read. And I think that's always a misconception. Oh, you're a voice actor, you just read. I mean, but you literally are reading. But what you do with it is like Masterpiece Theater. It's like those radio shows where, you're waiting to see what's happening. I mean, it's so vivid.
Yeah, like your stuff just comes to life. Like you feel like you're in the book.
Just say thank you, Scott. I mean, we're just
Thank you.
I
really do.
You really.
He doesn't even know how good he is. Isn't that awesome?
Well, and that's what makes you even great is because you're humble. But just that you really do have that something that really makes that one-dimensional page very, very vivid, and that's such a gift. I mean,
thanks. I appreciate all that. Again,
because here's the thing. Okay, I cannot watch thriller movies. It's too disturbing. I'm too visual. But when I can listen, and it gives me that imagery, but it's not so. So I think that's just it's just a testament to your talent that you have.
Well, thank you. You know what? The only thing I try to keep in mind all the time is that I'm not there to do all of the work for the listener, and maybe that's why. Maybe that's what people say things like that, because, you know, in a film we're going to be told everything. We're going to be told how to feel, what to hear, what to see, everything. There's no blanks. In a book, there's all sorts of blanks. And I think that it's best when the listener can do part of that job, him or herself. I had you're talking about reviews, I did In Cold Blood, and it takes place in Kansas. I'd been to Kansas, I think, on a 90-minute layover one time. I'd never, you know.
A meaningful experience.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Skyped over to Kansas.
But as far as knowing how people talk in Kansas, no clue. And yet Truman Capote he's talking in depth about the Kansan accent. And I'm thinking I'm setting myself up for failure here. I'm never going to be able to do it right. And then I just decided I'm not going to do any at all. Well, not at all. What I did is just the slightest little thing. He would always use the word drawl. He would say that they drawled in their Kansan accent. And I grew up in Porterville, California, you know, and that's, you know, there's plenty of drawling people there. And I love Porterville, don't get me wrong. But I grew up, it was a rural community, and I know how to draw. I can draw with the best of them. So what I would do is I just slowed it down just a little bit. I added just a very kind of generic, maybe Southern kind of sound to it. But never something that you could say, oh, well, that's Alabama, or that's Tennessee, or Oklahoma. Anyway, 2 reviews I got. One said, what works is that Scott doesn't attempt any Kansan accents. He lets us fill that in for ourselves. And I thought, yes, absolutely, that's true. Good. The other one said, what works about this book is Scott's accents are pitch perfect, down to the local region, down to, like to the local county.
And that's why we love reviews.
Well, but I actually thought, you know, that review is correct.
Yeah.
But what they didn't realize, the reviewer didn't realize that he or she was doing that part of the job themselves.
Right.
And so I just try to put you in it enough that you can imagine. You can imagine what it looks like and how it feels.
Right.
That's
Wonderful.
good. And you thought about that beforehand. You wanted them to imagine it. So going in, good, very good, man.
Yeah.
Question for you. Now, I know because you got muscles and stuff like that. You work out at home every day. You're pumping iron in your garage and all that stuff. But before a session, an audiobook session, are there any vocal exercises that you go through?
No, I don't do vocal warm-ups, and I know I should. You know, I have friends of mine who swear by them.
No, we're just asking. It's not a judgment. He's
No,
like, I'm sorry.
I feel judged.
We're not scolding you.
I know. I think about my old teachers who are just going to want to smack me across the head and say, "Don't tell new people to the industry not to warm up their voice."
For you?
No, I don't. But what I do a lot of maintenance to my throat in terms of, you know, when I'm in the studio, the things I'm drinking, the fluids I'm just flushing constantly through.
Right.
You know, for
Hot fluids, cold fluids?
both. I do. Well, there are 4 things I do.
This is the exercise part that he doesn't do.
Yes.
Right. No, these aren't
didn't know he
exercises.
did.
So
But
it's
now
more
he does.
rituals.
These aren't
These
exercises.
are his
These are my
rituals.
rituals.
Yeah.
These are
Rituals.
what Kata
Ritual.
Mazer is.
Oh,
is,
good. He
is
brought
a great.
props. I
brought
love
props.
props.
Kata Mazer is a great audiobook narrator, and she calls what she does her potions. If you go into the studio, this is what you'll see on my desk. I have 4 potions.
Okay.
One prop will serve 2 functions. First is water, because you know. The larynx is a muscle, and muscles will fail without water. So when I'm turning the page, every time I turn the page, the first thing I do, water.
Every time.
Every time I turn the
I'm
page.
actually going to join
That's an
you.
exercise right there, by the way.
Yeah.
Well, I'll take some water. Okay.
After the water, then comes the hot liquid, which I keep as scalding as possible, and I drink throat coat tea by
Nice.
Traditional Medicinals. I'll give them a plug.
Yes.
I'm not getting paid.
We
but
love them. Maybe
anybody,
they'll want to sponsor our
anybody in
show.
the,
Right.
absolutely. I was doing Cyrano years ago, and I 3.5 hours of yelling, and I realized throat coat is really great at getting rid of sore throats. It would probably be good for not getting them in the first place. So I just drink it all day long.
So whether
now.
you need it or not.
Whether I need
it's
it or
always in
not,
there.
I've got, so I go water, then throat coat.
Okay, there goes the throat coat. See, I'm imagining I could smell throat coat. See, you're that good.
Well, I do this for a living, you know.
What can I say?
The next thing I do is to get rid of the popping sounds. Not Visine, no.
Visine in the mouth.
No,
That's under the tongue.
Oh boy.
I can't even imagine what that would taste like. Yikes.
Not good.
No, this is to get rid of mouth noises. You know, I mean, you know, we all know.
Yeah.
That happens. So after you talk out loud for 6 or 8 minutes, however long it takes to do 2 pages, this is what I do.
Okay.
Really cuts through all of the, you know, stickum and stuff that gets on the end of your tongue.
What is that?
Salt
A
will work.
mini scope?
This is just like it's like Binaca, but I just get like the generic ones at Walgreens.
Okay.
Nice.
You know,
At Walgreens or
I
Rite
literally
Aid
buy them
or
by the
CVS.
box. There's like 50 or 60 in a box. I just buy them all, and I walk up to the counter and they're like, "How many's in there?" I'm like, "I don't know."
I don't care.
And they're like,
I
are
just
you in
need
some
them.
sort of
And
rehab
they're like
program?
offended that they have to count them.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not asking you to scan them, count them, 59 at, and then scan it once, whatever.
Well, we know what to get you for Christmas.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. We'll get you a
My friends
case.
actually do that.
Nice.
The last thing is I use just lip balm. I use Blistek, and it doesn't really exactly look masculine because I'm not putting it
you're a
on.
dabber.
I'm a
It's not
dabber.
really when
but
you
I-
dab
Oh, see that? Because
no, I was.
If you had like a little mirror while you're doing it, and you, then we'd have
The
problems.
head of Random House, a guy who used to run Random House years ago, he gives me such grief every time he sees me do it in public. He goes, "Wow, you're looking really manly there." You know? But the thing is, you don't put it on like it's lipstick because I've noticed
Too
if you
thick.
do, it's too
Yeah.
thick and you
Right,
pop too
right,
much.
defeats the
And so I
purpose,
found that
yeah.
if you dab, it's just enough.
A little dab will do you.
Will actually do you.
Wow.
That's
just
great.
These are some pretty good
So these are 4
tricks there.
things. So those,
and
so
I
those are
love
my
that
props.
you reenacted it. I love that.
I hope you guys took some notes on that.
I
Because
love
that's
that.
some good stuff.
So take us through a little bit through the process because even
Okay.
people in the voiceover industry this is necessarily not an area that they are even familiar with.
Sure.
So you're in the booth. Now, have you read the book ahead of time or do you like to be fresh?
You know, people ask me that question a lot. Do I read the book ahead of time? Yes and no. There are. I always tell students. I'll admit there are times I don't read the book. I think you should read the book. I always tell my students, do as I say, not as I do,
Right.
because you really need to know as much as possible about the story. If it's a whodunit, you have to know whodunit.
Yeah.
You do, because authors, you know, they manipulate us in a really great and hopefully subtle way. They're gonna give us the red herrings. They're gonna give us these portentous lines that. It's like the movie The Sixth Sense. You know, when you get to the end of that, you know, every time you'd see, you know, what was it? The symbology they used was the red door handle. You know, if I was reading that book, a book of The Sixth Sense, if I talked about, you know, the portentous red door handle, you know, if I just went like overboard, people would be like, well, okay, of course there's something significant there. I need to read it as just like, he turned the red door handle. And yet at the end of the book, there will come that moment where everybody reassesses and they go, oh, right, it's the door handle, right. I need to know what the red herrings are.
Right.
So I know to throw them away, toss them off lightly, you know.
Right.
So I always say yes, read the book. The times that I don't, I'm still working with a producer who has. And she'll say, no, that character isn't actually from Glasgow, it's from, you know, Alabama, you know, for my crazy choices that I make. So typically, yes, you do read the book. Research happens. It depends on whether you're producing the book yourself or you're working with a director, producer. If that's the case, the director usually handles the research. But if you're doing it yourself, you either do it yourself or you hire a researcher. And then you basically you go in. You're looking for clues. You're looking for anything that tells you what a character's like. If they sometimes they'll give you easier things like an accent. They'll tell you a character's from Alabama or from Glasgow or from Canada or from New York. But other times they're not going to tell you much. They're going to tell you more emotional things. They'll tell you that this really kind of strident, horrible character, you know, you think that she's just kind of a harpy, you know, because she's always just mad and angry all the time. Well, they'll tell you at the end of the book it's because of a tragedy that happened. And so that gives you an indication.
Or she forgot to take her meds or something like that.
There's that as
I
well,
hate
yeah.
when that happens.
But either way, that's a clue into how you should be playing that character.
Yes,
You know?
yeah.
So you look for little subtle hints like that. A lot of narrators, I don't personally do this, but a lot of narrators will break down the dialogue into color coding, basically. They'll get different colored highlighter pens, and they'll, David's lines will be in yellow, and Peter's in green, and Susan's in blue. So they all know as they're moving, if they just have a quick glance at the page, they may not know what's going on, but they know who's going to be in the scene. It's a visual cue. So a lot of people do that. But I always try to prepare myself another way. I try to prepare my mood, because especially when I'm working on genres that are maybe a little bit out of the ordinary. If I'm working on horror, I did a great book by Richard Matheson. It was called The Stir of Echoes. It was the Kevin Bacon movie from 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It's great. It's a great story. I read it when I was a kid. I think it came out in the 60s or 70s. I can't remember. Anyway. It's a story about a guy who flatly does not believe in ghosts, and yet all of a sudden his 3-year-old son is speaking with the voice of an 80-year-old dead woman. And he suddenly has to face the idea that maybe everything he's believed for all these years isn't true, and that ghosts do exist. And he is scared to death the entire book. So the night before it, I watched The Ring. The night before, I had done all the preparation, I'd read the book. I watched The Ring. I wanted to scare myself silly. And the night after the first day recording, before going into the studio the next day, I watched The Shining. I watched every movie I could find, the scariest movies I could find, because I thought, if I sound scared, if I'm actually physically, emotionally scared, the audience will hear it.
Yep.
And they will never know when they listen to that book, sounds like he watched The Ring last night. That they're never going to know. But in audiobooks, subtlety plays. And that's why I think that helps. When I did What Makes Sammy Run, it's a very kind of Howard Hawks, His Girl Friday, 1940s patter, the staccato burst dialogue. I listened to old radio shows every day on the way into the studio. I listened to Howard Duff doing Sam Spade. And because the entire book is literally done in that cadence, couldn't have been much older than 16 years old the first time I met him. Sammy Glick, sharp and quick, nice little fella. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I was going to essentially be doing a character voice for the entire book, and so I prepped myself by hearing that kind of character on the way to the studio every day and on the way home every day, just to hammer it home.
Yeah.
So.
Wow, that's really cool. Question: What is there like a typical length for a book? And if so, how does it break down time-wise? Like, how do you know how long it's going to take you to do a book?
People ask me all the time how many pages a day I do, and actually I never go by pages, because font size being what it is, we can adjust that. Kids' books versus really dense histories are going to be totally different. The typical book novel is 100,000 words. People typically speak anywhere from 9,300 to 9,500 words per hour. So I'm slower. My style is I try not to be ponderously slow, but I am slower than most narrators, so I only speak 9,000 words an hour. So for me, that would be about an 11-hour book, if it's 100,000 words. But I've done books. I did a book by Kurt Vonnegut, one of his last books. It was 87 minutes long. It took me a morning to do it. I did Atlas Shrugged, which was 1,100 pages and 62 hours. It took me a couple of months.
How long are your sessions normally?
Sessions, I try to record about a CD length at a time, 60 to 75 minutes. I try to get 3 hours of finished time a day, because it may take you 2 hours to get 1 hour of finished recording.
And if you make a mistake on a page, which I've heard you don't make very many.
I don't do that.
He doesn't make mistakes.
I'm sorry, I forgot who I was talking to. Where am I?
Scott Rick.
Yeah.
Hello.
Oh, I thought it was
Yeah.
Scott Rick. I'm sorry. Do you
Sorry if there's a Scott Rick out there.
Do you just? Sorry, Scott.
what is it?
I'm sure you're a very good reader. Do you just pick up, or do you have to start from square one, or how do you do
pick
that?
up from the beginning of that sentence. Basically, you go to wherever you ended the last time on a period. And sometimes I did a sentence one time. I'm not exaggerating. It was it was a Faulkner book, and the title is escaping me. There was a sentence that ran for 6 pages, literally. one sentence, not a period, for 6 pages. And it's a run-on. It's a stream of consciousness kind of thing. So I'm sorry, I'm not going to do 6 pages without making a mistake. And even if I did, I'd have to change pages every 2 pages.
Right.
So what I would have to concentrate on then was when I'd come to a comma, I would have to make sure I wasn't breathing, I wasn't exhaling, in or out, inhaling or exhaling, so it would be a good edit point. Because if I made a mistake on the next phrase, I would have to go to that comma rather than the period.
Right.
And that was nightmarish.
And do you typically finish one book once you start it, or can you do multiple books at a time? Does that get kind of tricky?
I can do multiple books. I try not to, but when I was doing Atlas Shrugged, it was 2 months. Well, it took me 2 months, although maybe really only 1 month of recording. But there was a Brad Meltzer title that came up in the middle of it, and I had to do that. And there was another title that came up, and it just, one is a backlist. It's been out for a long time already, and the other one has to come out by September 3rd. Okay, well, I have to take a break. The most I've worked on at once was I was narrating 3 books and prepping a 4th, and
That was a busy day.
Yeah.
It's one thing when you're working with a really great director and producer who can remind you, okay, there are no Brits in this book. No. The Scottish and Irish guys are in the other book you're doing on the weekend. It's so much easier to just do one at a time.
Yeah.
Wow. What's the most challenging part about being an audiobook narrator?
The hardest part of my job is, I think, the one that I enjoy the most. So I don't know if I would call it challenging. I think the hardest part is when you're doing science fiction, there are words that are completely made up, and you have no idea how to pronounce them. And as a science fiction fan, first and foremost, I don't want to guess. So I have to take the time, call up the author if they're willing to talk. Not, sometimes you can't get in touch. But when I do the Dune series, for instance, the first Dune had 498 words that were completely made up, appeared in no language on Earth, and the author had passed away. So I had to get in touch with his son, Brian, who's actually become a really good friend of mine because of this process. Now, every time there's a sequel or a prequel comes out, we get on the phone and we go over, what used to be 498 words is now well over 2,000 words because he just keeps making it more.
Wow.
And I don't...
Well, you must be fluent in the language
There
now.
are 3 guys on this planet who can speak Chakobsa, the language of Dune. And it's the 2 authors, Brian Anderson, Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson. And I'm the third. I'm the third guy on the planet.
Say something to us in Chakobsa.
Achhayo. That's the only one that's coming to mind right now.
Did you just say something nice, or what did you say?
I believe it means get inside. There's a storm coming.
Wow.
Yeah. Achhayo.
Achhayo.
Yeah. Achhayi with about 6 eyes. Achhayo.
Nice.
But
So if you could meet any of out of all the characters that you have met in your travels as a narrator, if you could meet one of them, who would you want to meet?
Oh man. Yikes.
Don't worry, they won't be. I know one isn't that many, but.
Well, I love doing the John Corey novels by Nelson DeMille. He's just such a smart ass, and that speaks to my heart. I'm a very sarcastic guy. If sarcasm was a language, I'm fluent.
Nice.
But actually, I think of all the characters, I would have to say Cyrano. Just because he was a real man, and I would want to. And we know the kind of fictionalized version of him. I would want to know the real guy.
Yeah. And you were in a Shakespeare company for 10 years. I mean, you performed Hamlet and Macbeth. And
Sure. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Doing classics really helps. Again, you're getting back to that idea of it just helps your diction. When I have to say. In the Dune series, when I have to talk about the Zen Heki Ganshu of Omicron 83.
Gesundheit.
Thank you. But it's like the Zen Heki Ganshu, really? I have to make that sound normal? But that's what you have to do in Shakespeare. It's heightened text, and you have to make it sound conversational. Have you ever seen Kenneth Branagh do Henry V or any of the Shakespeare films he's made? He sounds very conversational. And that's having that experience on stage. I can do that now in the audiobook. I got one of the audiobook reviews I got for the Dune series was they said I sounded like a tour guide for the planet Arrakis, because these things were just coming tripping off my tongue, and I thought, rock on, I've done my job.
That's a great compliment. Well, that's it for us this week, you guys. Thanks for watching.
That's right, and be sure and tune in next week for part 2 of our interview with Scott Brick. It's going to be insane.
It is. And go to vobuzzweekly.com and subscribe, and like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at VOBuzzWeekly. You guys take care, and just remember, you always have time for a little buzz.